I was appearing at the Paramount Theater in New York and doing the song on stage, and all these little girls would be backstage with their moms, and they bring their dogs backstage, and the mothers would say, I hate you, you know. They wouldn't exactly say that, but you knew how they were feeling. You made me do this.
How much is that doggy in the window? The one with the waggly tail.
I didn't realize how much a part of the record industry children were, other than a children's album. But it went beyond that. And I'm happy to say that it's gone through the generations now, and my grandchildren that my husband and I have been raising in their little dance class. That's one of the songs that they did. And they said, Grandma, I didn't know you did that. I'm very proud of the fact that I grew up in Oklahoma, and all the advantages that I did have and that I didn't have been a big bearing on my career. And I think that it's something that they should see and appreciate and know that they could be there too. And it just takes a song.
Jeff Moore is the man in charge of OKPOP and is our guest today. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here, lad. Heard a lot about you. Right off the top, and for the folk at home, what is OKPOP?
Well, OKPOP is the Oklahoma Museum of Popular Culture. And it's a project that was started by the Oklahoma Historical Society. And actually, we started the project probably 8 years ago with an exhibit we did in Oklahoma City on Oklahoma rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And the state was getting ready to celebrate the centennial, and a lot of the obvious Oklahoma stories were being celebrated. And so we just had this crazy idea on the staff to do something special the year after the centennial.
Sure.
And do an exhibit on rock and roll. And that's when we just kind of fell into this treasure trove of amazing stories.
Are you from here?
I have been here 20 years. So actually about 25 years in the state. But
so you probably had the same rude awakening that I did.
I did. I lived all over the country, and my father was retired Army, and so moved around a lot, and came here for college and have stayed. So I'm an Oklahoman by choice. But you're right. When you come to Oklahoma, there's an amazing awakening because so much has happened here in such a short amount of time that really has had international implications.
You bet.
And I think that's why when we stumbled onto this story, and I say we kind of stumbled, even though a lot of these stories have been known by Oklahomans for many years, what we realized is that their stories weren't being told on a national or international level. Many people know of the Bob Wills of the world or the Leon Russells of the world, but they didn't know the significance that Oklahoma played in their careers.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute.
Sure.
Because I'm a product of growing up in the country many years ago. But when I was a very small boy, my grandfather used to read the Sunday comics to me. And he always started with Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy was created and drawn and storied by
Chester Gould.
Chester Gould, who's from
Pawnee,
Oklahoma.
That's right. Went to Oklahoma State University and got a job right out of college at the Chicago Tribune, and took the skills that he learned growing up. His father owned a bank in Pawnee, and he'd do sketches, and his father put him up in the window, and I guess they kind of thought that would be the extent of his career. But
well, we've got a piece that we're going to run right now.
Okay.
On Chester. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about that and about OKPOP. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, settle back and relax and take this in on Chester Gould.
There are a huge number of very influential and very talented
don't have a
Oklahomans
moniker, boss.
that worked in comic books, comic strips, and graphic novels. Some of them even also worked in animation. I would have to say that the most famous and most influential of them all was Chester Gould.
There was nothing like it in comics, and so it didn't take long for it to capture the public imagination. Crime was rampant throughout the 20s and into the early 30s, and Chicago was known for criminal activity. Gould created a character who was an honest, upright, incorruptible cop, and was just a righteous guy.
That was always an interesting strip because it was way ahead of its time as far as crime fighting and investigation. And he was ahead of the police in a lot of things as far as techniques. I mean, he was really a smart writer.
It had a gigantic impact. It was read probably at its height by about 200 million people a day.
The thing about the Dick Tracy strip was the wonderful rogues gallery of villains Dick Tracy had. BB eyes, flat top, prune face. At the time, I really liked Batman, and I always felt that Chester Gould's villains influenced the Batman villains because Batman had a similar, what I felt, a comparable rogues gallery to the Dick Tracy.
Dick Tracy was one of the first really extremely merchandised comic books. My gosh, there isn't anything that at one time or another didn't have a Dick Tracy face stamped on it at its height. Hugely, hugely influential. And of all the people who have worked in comics, I would have to say that as far as Oklahomans are concerned, Chester Gould is our big guy.
And we're back with Jeff. I've got to insert a quick story here. Many years ago, when he was still working, still doing creative work, just cranking them out right and left, Charles Banks Wilson was a close personal friend of mine. His father, at one time, was the manager of the theater directly across the street from where his studio was in Miami. And when he was a boy, just a very young boy, you know, vaudeville was still underway. Will Rogers would play the theater there, and as he worked on stage, Will would be under a table sketching his picture.
Really?
Before he died, and I have to go back several years before that, he found one of those tables and took it with him when he moved to Arkansas, but he found it, and it was dated and signed from the time Will Rogers played the theater in Miami, Oklahoma. And there's stuff like that all over this place.
Wow.
What all will OKPOP encompass?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Will Rogers because I think one of the things that is important about the Oklahoma story in popular culture, which will cover film, television, radio, stage performance, humor, cartoonists like Chester Gould, which led into comic books, and then music will be a huge, huge part of it. So it's all those aspects of what we know today as popular culture. But I really think that Will Rogers was the one because he was the first icon in pop culture in the world. He's from Oklahoma, and I think what he did is he provided a level of kind of an umbrella of protection in this state, where if some young person went to their father working the fields or cattle or whatever, and said, I want to go to California, or I want to go to New York, or I want to get into television or sing. Well, Will did it, and Will kept his Oklahoma nature, and he was successful. Well, go for it. And I really think that he inspired a lot of what we
opened the door for a lot of folks.
That this state has.
Gosh, and there's been so many. Now, will OKPOP include sport figures as well?
Sure, as they relate to popular culture, absolutely.
Did you know that Walter Cronkite broke some bones in Oklahoma?
That's right. He covered OU football games.
That's right. And one of the interesting things about it, and I heard him tell this story, he kept a book on each player. So if a player made you know, some kind of a fancy move on the field, he could flip to that page and say, well, that was Ralph Williams down there. His parents are here today, you know.
Wow.
And it became you know, the format for a lot of guys that would follow sports coverage.
Absolutely.
And a lot of folks don't know that. All kinds of history. Don't get me started, man.
We can talk all day.
That's
why we're doing a museum.
I'm going to be one of your better customers.
Oh, that's
I'll be
great.
sitting out there whittling when I'm 90 or something. We're going to take a short break, come back. I want to talk to you about this and a few other things going on with OKPOP, all right? We'll be back right after this.